This is coffee number 5. I'm your host, Lara Schmoisman.
Hi guys, welcome back to coffee number 5. As you know, I love meeting people. You meet people here and there and somewhere there too. But you know there are those people that they keep coming up to you, and that's why I love LinkedIn. That sometimes you even engage with someone in LinkedIn that you don't really know in person, but you're aware of those people in your space, and then pop, you're in an event and you really meet them in real life, and that's great. And this was a case with Ewelina Aiossa. Did I say it right?
Yes, Ewelina Aiossa, yes.
Welcome to coffee number 5. I'm so excited to have you here today because I always was fascinated how you're working with brands, and not only you working in the development of brands, but also in the efficacy. And I think that efficacy is something so important and so current right now. People are tired of brands that they are not performing.
hmm
So, tell us, how did you get here and why you concentrate on efficacy?
Yeah, so I've been in the, I guess, beauty industry, specifically in like the scientific skincare beauty space for over 15 years
Hmm.
with corporate America. So I have to say that I've learned from the best minds in the beauty, between researchers, cosmetic chemists to, biochemists and formulators, scientists, R&D labs. I've worked at PFAB Dermocosmetics on a couple of the derm dispense brands. I was a head of skin pharmaceuticals marketing and product development for the US market for over 4 years. So I was exposed to the scientific beauty, I would say, before it became mainstream. I feel like all of the brands nowadays claim to have clinical efficacy and some kind of a clinical study, which is nothing but a perception study, right? On
Yeah.
a consumer perception study on steroids. I was engaging with clinical studies and doing research in PubMed on raw materials and molecules with researching dermatologists, when I was, in my late 20s, I would say early 30s. I also got a privilege to work with a contract manufacturer that actually caters to all the physician dispense brands and manufactures brands for all the derms brands that are sold at Sephora, Ulta,
Hmm.
but now are very, very popular. So I think that's how it all started. I know nothing else but scientific and clinical beauty, derm beauty. And I believe that's where all the innovation kind of happens. I know that mass and luxury markets always visited, our booths, whichever company I was with, associated with, would, visit American Academy of Dermatology just to see what's new, novel coming up and kind of jump on a wagon. But I feel like dermatological beauty always spearheaded the innovations and paved the way for innovations. And then the mass and luxury markets with bigger budget were able to commercialize it or maybe make it more mainstream. Yes, so
I
that's
have a
how
question.
it started.
Having clinicals, and it takes time, takes a lot of time, and that
Yes,
it's very, very expensive. There is
correct.
any way, because I know that today you're working with younger brands or smaller brands. There is any way that you can replace those clinicals or do it in a more affordable way?
Yes, I would say you have to be creative when it comes to writing the clinical study protocol, for the lack of words. Yeah, but yeah, absolutely. You have to obviously lead with the end point of discovery, what kind of claims you want to deliver on a product, and what kind of claims you want to validate. Clearly, you can conduct a perception study, but it's just consumer kind of a questionnaire. You can engage a dermatologist to also sign up on the study. You can go with instrumental analysis. I work with a lot of CRO organizations, clinical research organizations, here domestically, but also overseas. Because of my European roots, I do have relationships with companies in Spain, in Argentina, that can conduct clinical studies with tremendous savings and with a diverse population. So, quite frankly, through my career, I established the relationships with CROs domestically and also overseas. And whenever I work or consult for emerging brands, indie brands, we usually try to tap into the resources from overseas just because of the savings, unless their MO is to have a clinical study published in a peer-reviewed journal here in the United States. Then I advise them to engage a dermatologist, researcher who either sits on advisory board for the peer-reviewed publication or has some kind of a credibility in the market. So it's usually a strategic conversation, but there are options out there. And also, you can focus on running a safety clinical, and when it comes to efficacy clinical, that's another beast in itself. But like I said, you can be very creative when it comes to endpoint, I guess, claims. And
So, how far a young brand or a middle-sized brand can reach out and find places? You just go to Google and find a CRO?
I'm sure you can. I haven't
Okay.
done that. Like I said, I've been in the industry for so long. I would say my Rolodex of contacts is beyond dermatologists and aestheticians, but it's also, clinical research organizations, the contract development organizations. I know who works with whom in the industry. So I would say it's not necessarily word of mouth, but also when I attend different trade shows, that's where I learn about perhaps new offering or new novel approaches to conducting clinical studies.
Hmm.
You definitely can Google. I would say Google is not necessarily the trusted source of information. I would
I
say
know,
you
and that's why I'm asking, because there are a lot of people that end up googling and end up with a bad marketing agency, and it happens always. So that's what I wanted
can.
to get at, your that it's all about making relationships and knowing people in the
I
industry.
would say so. And I listen, it takes time, and foster those relationships. I do not tap into my Rolodex of contacts easily. It's very selective who I introduce to whom it has to, have some kind of synergy and be meaningful. Like I said, I've worked for L'Oreal's of the world, Pierre Fabs of the world. They have established business units in Europe. So I know who they use when it comes to CROs in Europe. And I know it's just by default, there is some cost savings. And when you start talking to people and for example, request a sample of a clinical report, which is obviously confidential, there's never a client disclosed, but you get an idea, who to go to. I know a lot of derm companies love to use Brazilian-based CROs for a couple of reasons. First of all, Brazilian population is very diverse, so you can test on
Hmm.
the skin of color, you can test on Fitzpatrick from 1 to 6, but also they tend to have more of like, oily skin types, acneic skin
Hmm.
types. So they are launching an acneic kind of a product, over the counter drug. It makes sense for them to tap into that population roster. Um, again, like it makes sense. There's hubs in the world, and obviously, if you're trying to test on Asian population, you might have a better luck engaging lab in Asia Pacific, or at least they're a branch.
That's such an important thing what you just said,
Mhm.
because you need to know who is your primary target.
Correct.
And when you know, and this is something you need to start very early on,
Mhm.
and know, and I think no cream, not cosmetics is for everyone. So you need to know early on who is your target audience and make the research based in that population.
Absolutely. And I'll be honest with you, I mean, there's many methodologies when it comes to running clinical studies. It could be punch biopsy, it could be tape stripping, it could be just, instrumental evaluation. We know that, the more invasive types of evaluations are not necessarily as welcome by the US population. So that's why you outsource it overseas sometimes. But it really depends what kind of clinical study you're running. I work with topical skincare brands, but also in supplements and nutraceuticals. And it's kind of like on a different level when it comes to providing proof of efficacy of a supplement. Sometimes you have to do a blood test. Sometimes it's involves even urine analysis. It's more complex, and I would say it's more involved, but it's all doable. And you sometimes, when it comes to topical skin evaluation, you also have to take into consideration the climate. Let's say when I run, clinical study in my Spain-based CRO lab, I know that this population is probably exposed to sunshine all year round. Versus if I was to tap into population in
Yeah.
Northeast America, so sometimes the numbers get skewed. I have to be very strategic what kind of prerequisite I'm, asking of the target audience
But
to.
also, you need to be very careful, and the marketing care in me is gonna come in here and give my 2 cents, because you need to be very careful with the claims that you want to
Mhm.
get from your clinicals, because also when you go to organizations like Amazon or marketplaces, but using certain words, you can get really red flagged.
Of course, yeah. It's the FDA, definition of a cosmetic
Exactly.
versus a drug. Yeah. So that's why it's important to work with like regulatory compliance department, make sure we don't make any skin structure change claims because you want to stay within the cosmetic definition versus a drug. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and if you do have a cosmetic drug such as a sunscreen or acne formulation, maybe with salicylic acid, that has to follow the FDA OTC monogram, and it requires
Mm-hmm.
specialty testing and obviously a different investment when it comes to budgetary, investment. So yeah.
Yeah. So, because let's be honest, nowadays having creating a cosmetics line is not that difficult.
Right. Yeah. Fairly easily.
So, how do you can differentiate from others? How do you make sure that from the conception you are different?
Uh, I think it all happens starts with the idea, the mission statement, having a proprietary molecule technology, maybe a delivery system, maybe a new indication you're trying to address. That definitely is helpful. You do have to have a hero SKU because by the rule of thumb, the 80-20 rule still is valid, where usually 80% of your sales come from a 20% of your product, and it's usually the hero SKU that pulls the entire engine. So I would say have a very, very a specific go-to-market strategy and a strong brand and product positioning and some kind of a unique selling proposition. May it be, like I said, a unique molecule, maybe a patented molecule or ingredient, something novel. Newness always sells. But you do have to capitalize on the momentum rather quickly. And there's a lot of copycutters out there. I
Yeah.
would say doing the copycat approach where you just recreate somebody else's success and mirror their success, it's not the best foot forward unless you can compete on price. But we know that perception is reality, and sometimes when you're the cheapest brand on the market, you are being clustered into not as effective, and vice versa. So it would
Well,
really have
you
to depend
mentioned
on where you want to
before
go.
you
Mhm.
mentioned before about being supported by a dermatologist or a dermatologist signing off on your case studies uh, or on your observation studies. So
Correct.
how do you go about that? You just go and knock on the door of a dermatologist and say, hey?
Yes, you can if they have a setup to conduct, clinical research with their patient populations, or you can just opt in to work with a dermatologist that is already associated with a CRO. So it's just like an added cost affiliated with having a dermatologist kind of sign off on the clinical study. It's done under their supervision, and then you can say it's dermatologist tested. So it's just a
Mm-hmm.
claim that you can make. But you don't have to go directly to dermatologist. You can just opt in with CRO to engage a dermatologist. It may not be somebody super known. You may not be able to use their name, image, and likeness in marketing pieces, but you can
Uh-huh.
make this claim that it's dermatologist tested. And
Yeah.
listen, I'm not a CRO, so I may not have all the answers. It's just from my experience. I know that that's
No,
how it works.
and it's great to have the experience, and it's
Mhm.
great that you have the experience, and people actually know that what a CRO is,
Mhm.
and be able to educate themselves by listening to you here,
Mhm.
and we can give that information. But
Yeah.
so I have another question for you because you are, I mean, your experience is in marketing, but also in creating very unique brands and to create lines of brands. I always say that if you don't have a cohesive brand, you don't have a brand, you have a collection of products. So, how do you make sure that when you're creating a brand, the products not only work one with the other? When you sell, I mean, I think that there is a misunderstanding out there that you can sometimes it's great to mix and match, but the line of products are created to work together.
Ideally, right, you wouldn't want people shopping out of your brand and
Exactly.
cherry picking their favorites. I think it makes sense to go to market with like a mini regimen, for the lack of a better word, which always encompasses like number one step in everybody's skincare regimen is proper cleansing, and then some kind of a hydration, and ideally would end with a protection via broad spectrum sunscreen. But that doesn't mean you have to have all three or all 50 SKUs to pick from. You can start slow and go to the market, like I said, with a hero SKU just to get the buzz growing and the brand awareness, and then scale accordingly. But I am a classically trained marketer, and I feel like working at L'Oreal, that's marketing and branding powerhouse on another level. I got to learn not only from my peers on skin SkinCeuticals, but also tap into other 20 brands that L'Oreal owns. We were sharing best practices, and whatever worked for Yves Saint Laurent or Armani or even Kiehl's, we would incorporate into skin SkinCeuticals and vice versa. I feel like leading with innovation is definitely key, at least in this space, like dermatological beauty. Innovation is key. And it may come in different formats. It could be the way you dispense the product. Maybe it's a new different mechanism of action. It could be a new indication. For example, the hero product at SkinCeuticals has been around for over a decade. What we did differently is we found a new indication for it. Similar with pharmaceutical companies, they might have a drug, even like Botox, right? It was indicated for one thing, and now it's indicated for multiple different, addresses different, targets. So I think the key is to launch a product that it's timeless and multitasking, because that's what consumers want nowadays. They want multifunctional, multitasking products, and having the arsenal of tools within the line to complement that hero SKU, ideally, because like I said, you don't want people to shop outside of the brand. You don't want to lose them for, let's say, a cleanser or a sunscreen from another brand, because they may not come back to you to replenish. They might discover something else. So ideally you would lock them in. As loyalists, obviously it's easier said than done, but I feel like everybody should have that kind of mo to provide at least an essential skincare regimen, and anybody can start on, and then build it out gradually based on trends, based on your target audience needs, and based where the market is heading.
Yeah, and let me ask you a question, because right now, um, everyone is so based on social proof, and people are, every time they're reading and reading less, so people are really not going to go and read a clinical, and but they are going to social media and listen what people have to say. So how do you integrate this idea of having the right information in one hand about clinicals, from the marketing side, how that integrate that messaging and integrate with the social proof?
Yeah, I think social proof is huge. It's like a new currency, digital currency. Because I work with a
Yes,
lot
it
of
is.
private equity firms and venture capitalists who are looking into mergers and acquisitions in this space. And 5 years ago, this wasn't even maybe as much of a conversation, but nowadays everybody checks, what your community is like, and obviously the social proof. And I feel like, social media is just like another digital channel that the brands can leverage. Especially when it comes to scientific brands, they should be leading with education. So making the science and the claims snackable, short form video form is obviously is trending. Engaging with influencers. I feel like I don't want to be teaching anybody digital marketing, because I'm sure there's more experts out there than I am, but I know that's what works for beauty brands. And if you don't exist on Instagram in particular, it's almost like you don't exist. Everybody always, obviously, they go to your website because it's the window to the world, but they will click on your social icons and they will see.
Yeah, and you need to have that social proof, and you need
Yes.
that brand awareness. Social media, I personally don't believe that there is so much. The purchase is not going to come directly from social media, in
Mhm.
my experience, but unless you're in TikTok Shop or one of those
Sure.
sale channels. But you need to create that brand awareness. You need to be present.
Absolutely. And you know what? You're discoverable. A lot of friends of mine use social media almost as a Google search engine. So if you're not
Oh, there
there,
are
you just
search engines. Yes,
yes. And
absolutely.
then for SEO purposes, I mean, YouTube, it's a low hanging fruit. I would definitely, invest in that channel as well, especially in the beauty space.
Yeah. So, what are the trends that you see in the industry this year? When we are recording this, we are in March 2025. So, what are the trends of your industry that you see? There is more clean beauty. I think that is a given now.
Mhm.
But what's going on in the space?
I think clean beauty, it's mainstream nowadays. If you're not clean, then it's almost it's not even like a primer messaging. Everybody should be clean, or as clean as it gets, or at least strive to be clean. Personalized beauty has been around for a while, but I think it's on a different level right now. You hear about genetic testing to customize the formulation you should be applying on your face. I think there's a lot of innovation happening in terms of ingredient science. So there's synthetic bioactive ingredients that raw material vendors are working on commercializing and prove the efficacy from specialized peptides. Now we also hear about, obviously exosomes, which is a byproduct almost of stem cells. Stem cells have been around for a while, but I think it's just becoming on a different level. Like those ingredients are very specialized. I think they are highly purified. And we all, for example, heard about green tea extract being good for us when ingested, but also when applied to the skin. But now we know that raw material vendors are able to just derive the polyphenol fraction of green tea, the
Mm-hmm.
ECGC. That are, scoring high on the RX scale because that's what really is acting or meaningful for your skin. So instead of perhaps just getting an ingredient, you're getting the specialized derivative or specialized polyphenol fraction of the ingredient that normally was popularized. So I think that's what's trending. And obviously, regenerative skincare and medicine, there's blurred lines.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of skincare companies actually expanding their portfolio into ingestibles, so supplements as well. We know that there was a skinification of body care, skinification of hair care. It's not going away. I feel like people
And
are
I mean,
realizing
what
that
is,
we've been investing.
but I also feel like there is a crossover lately in two other industries, beauty and wellness,
Yes.
and also fragrance. So, what's your take in those two industries and how they're crossover into the beauty industry?
Yeah, I mean, wellness obviously is here to stay. I think we all talk about self care. Skincare is a big part of it because skin is the largest organ of your body. And I feel like, a lot of ingredients that are good for your wellness and, are also good for your skin. So there's almost like an overlap of a lot of botanicals, extracts, traditional Chinese medicine that it's entering that space and being more prominent. I feel like people are more open to having naturally derived ingredients, especially those that we're used to just buying biotech, or maybe tapping into the two of both worlds and bridging the gap. And when it comes to fragrance, I'll be honest with you, I'm not as familiar with fragrance industry. I've launched fragrances before, I incubated fragrances before, but that's not something that I'm fluent in. So I don't want to misinform anybody. You probably have more
No, but I
experience.
did you see it also that there is a big trend of new brands that they are very strong with fragrances, not only perfumes, but only
Yes.
including very unique fragrances into their products.
Yes, and a lot of clean, I think, aspect is also being incorporated into fragrances. So less synthetic and more natural approach. And I feel like the old, French fragrance houses are having a renaissance. I think there's a lot of fragrances coming out of the Middle East as well. The oud fragrances, you hear about it a little bit more. They had a prominent presence at Cosmoproof, so I feel like it's
Hmm.
definitely here to stay. It's integral part of beauty, and I think it's cultural for some,
I
regions as
agree.
well, right? And then you see a lot of dupes as well. So you have, for example, Dossier, who's, launching fragrances that are a little bit cleaner and more, I don't say affordable for the lack of better vocabulary, but it's a dupe of a popular fragrance that may not be as clean
Yeah.
and also not as attainable for some certain
Also,
populations.
there is this thought of products that are organic or using organic ingredients that they are better for you. What's your experience with that? Because many times organic ingredients might not be as effective as other ingredients.
I mean, listen, I love nature. I try to eat organic. I would say I would prefer to put organic products on my face, but quite frankly, it's still so like unregulated. Organic does work. I don't think it's known for being super efficacious or result driven. I think it's more for like sensitive skin. These are products that will not necessarily cause any aggravation. I don't know if they are as corrective in nature. They are probably more like preventive. I'm thinking they are, packed with antioxidants and maybe like nourishing ingredients. I feel when it comes to corrective and treatment products, you still need the biotech, you still need the peptides, you still might need the retinol. You can opt in to go bakuchiol route, which is a natural derived ingredient. It could be organic. But obviously there is audience for organic beauty products out there, to
Yeah,
each its own. There's enough of market share for all of us to live, together. I just wouldn't classify them as the result oriented beauty. It's probably for people perhaps who have more of a health awareness, so maybe they went through health issue and now they're opting into organic beauty and organic skincare. But like I said, I think there is room for all types of skincare, brands to
absolutely.
coexist.
I mean, I believe that there is room always to have one more brand as long as there is an unique brand
Mhm.
and for a clear target audience.
Right. So like Eminence Organics, I think they are all about organics and they do live in a medical spa channel. But I don't believe that every single esthetician is using exclusively just Eminence products. I feel like they are supplementing maybe certain treatment products from other brands. So it's definitely a nice add-on. I don't think it's, your 100% go-to solution.
Yeah.
Maybe when
And
you're young and have a plump skin and all you want to do is just, keep the hydration and healthy glow going, great. But once you start seeing the signs of aging, you have to tap into, the biotech and more like result
uh,
oriented.
absolutely. And also, it's about the combination. And you start seeing skin disorders and issues. Now we have also wonderful technologies out there that lasers and spa treatments. So skincare also becomes like a maintenance or complementary to your treatments.
Yes, it's all about integrating skincare into in-office modalities. We've been preaching that at Skin Circles, like 10 years ago, and
Yeah.
now it's becoming mainstream as aesthetic procedures becoming more affordable and mainstream. Before, you would not even think about it until you were in your 40s, 50s, 60s. Now you see, young people engaging in
Well,
lasers for
I think also
efficacy.
there is more data and more awareness of what's going on and what happened to our skin. That mature skin is not in your 60. You don't have to be a senior and having a Medicare card to have a mature skin. Your skin start maturing in your 30s. And
Absolutely.
depends on genetics and depends of many things. That you need to consider on each skin. And this is, I love recommendations with from my friends, but I have different needs than my friends, so not necessarily everything will work for me.
Absolutely. You gotta test and see what works for you, and what works for you yesterday may not work for you tomorrow. Your skin also reaches a plateau moment. That's why I love to
Yes,
have like a step up skincare regimens where you cycle things on and off, gradually, obviously, no drastic changes. But absolutely, that's why I said
but
there's room for all
but
of us to
also
coexist.
but also we need consistency. When you try a product, you need to give it time. It won't work in 5 days.
Yes, you work with your skin cycle, which it's 28 days when you're young, and obviously it's a little bit longer when you as we age. So you do have to give your skin some time to adjust. It's a living and breathing organ. Nothing happens overnight. That's why even the clinical studies we run a minimum of 3 to 6 months, because you want to show some kind of improvement. But like we know, it's not going to happen in a month. It's not going to happen in 2 months.
Absolutely. At least when you're trying a product, you need to be consistent, and you cannot say it doesn't work for me in 10 days.
Yeah. And you know what? The terms that I work with always say compliance is key. If you find a product that you love to use and use it regularly, then stick with it.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for having coffee with us today. This was really, really enlightening. And thank you for sharing all this information.
Thank you.
And to you guys, I was so happy to have you here today. And I will see you next week with more coffee number 5.
Bye.
Find everything you need at larashmoisman.com or in the episode notes right below. Don't forget to subscribe. It was so good to have you here today. See you next time. Catch you on the flip side. Ciao, ciao.